The unthinkable attack. The vast emptiness of space was silent, peaceful, until it wasn't. The human hospital ship, Solace, drifted through the darkness, a beacon of hope in the cold void. It was massive, almost the size of a battleship, but it had no weapons. Painted white with a red cross glowing on its hull, it carried the wounded from all sides of the galactic conflict. Humans and aliens alike were treated inside. Soldiers, civilians, even prisoners of war. The Solace belonged to no army. It was neutral, protected under the Galactic Treaty of War Ethics. Inside, Dr. Emily Carter, the lead surgeon, wiped sweat from her forehead. Another long shift, another life saved. The emergency room was filled with alien and human patients, their groans and beeping monitors the only sounds breaking the quiet hum of the ship's systems. The Solace had been operating in this sector for 3 months, moving between battlefields to rescue survivors and provide medical aid. No one had ever dared attack it. Until now. A sudden blaring alarm shook the ship. Unknown vessels approaching. The ship's automated warning system activated. Red lights flashed across the halls as nurses and doctors looked up in confusion. There wasn't supposed to be any danger. The Galactic Council had guaranteed safe passage to the Solace and all hospital ships under its protection. On the bridge, Captain Julian Ross stood frozen as he stared at the radar screen. A fleet of massive warships had just exited hyperspace, heading straight for them. Their markings were clear: Draknar Dominion warships. His blood ran cold. The Draknar were a brutal, war-hungry species known for their merciless conquests. But they had always followed the rules of war. They had never attacked a hospital ship before. "Open a channel," Ross ordered. The comm officer hesitated, then nodded as the signal connected. A holographic figure appeared, a Draknar warlord, his reptilian eyes glowing with malice. His armored form loomed over the humans on the bridge, his scaly lips twisting into a cruel smirk. "Human captain," the warlord growled, his voice filled with mockery. "You are trespassing in Draknar space." Ross clenched his fists. "This is a medical vessel. We are neutral. You know that." The warlord chuckled. "Neutrality." His voice dripped with amusement. "There is no neutrality in war. You help our enemies. That makes you our enemy." Ross felt a cold sweat forming. "We have wounded aboard. Civilians. Innocents." The warlord's eyes glowed brighter. "Then they will die as weaklings." Before Ross could speak, the transmission cut off. And then the first shot was fired. A massive explosion rocked the Solace, throwing doctors and patients to the ground. The force of the blast ripped through the lower decks, causing fires to erupt instantly. The ship's automatic defense systems tried to raise shields, but the Solace had no weapons, no real armor. It was a hospital, not a warship. Dr. Carter barely had time to grab onto the nearest bed before the ship lurched violently. Patients screamed as medical equipment crashed to the floor. She turned to the nearest nurse. "Get them to the escape pods." Now. Another explosion. This time, the entire right side of the ship tore open. Bodies were sucked into the vacuum of space. On the bridge, Captain Ross shouted orders desperately. "Send a distress signal to Earth. Get word to the fleet." The comm officer tried, but his screen flickered. "Jamming signal. Communications are down." Outside, the Draknar warships surrounded the Solace, firing mercilessly. They didn't care about treaties. They didn't care about rules. They wanted to send a message to the galaxy: no one can protect you. Not even humans. Ross gritted his teeth. "If we can't send a signal, then we make sure someone escapes." He turned to the navigation officer. "Redirect all remaining power to the escape pods. Get as many people out as possible." The officer hesitated. "But Captain..." Ross cut him off. "That's an order." The ship shuddered again. A direct hit to the main engine. The lights flickered. Fires erupted in several corridors. In the medical bay, Dr. Carter pushed a wounded soldier into an escape pod. Around her, nurses and medics helped patients inside. The small pods launched one by one, carrying survivors away from the burning wreckage. But there weren't enough. There were never enough. On the bridge, Captain Ross watched as the Draknar's flagship charged its main weapon, a devastating plasma lance, enough to destroy the entire ship in one shot. Ross exhaled slowly. He had one final order to give. He pressed a button on his console, recording a short transmission, one that would automatically send itself the moment the ship was destroyed. To the Terran fleet, this is Captain Julian Ross of the hospital ship Solace. We have been attacked. No warning, no mercy. They have committed an act of war. If you hear this, then we are gone, and you know what must be done. The Draknar warlord grinned as he watched the final shot fire from his flagship. The plasma beam cut through the Solace, tearing it apart in a blinding explosion. Hundreds of escape pods drifted into space, some escaping, many obliterated by the blast. Silence returned to the void. But far away, in the heart of Earth's military headquarters, the distress beacon flashed on a screen. Admiral Elias Ward read the message. His jaw tightened, his fingers curled into fists. He turned to his officers, his voice cold as steel. Mobilize the fleet. The Draknar just made the worst mistake of their lives. Humanity's fury awakens. The message from the Solace had barely finished playing when the command center on Luna Base fell silent. Every officer, every soldier, every technician, all stood frozen. The holographic display still flickered with Captain Julian Ross's final words. If you hear this, then we are gone, and you know what must be done. A hospital ship, a vessel of peace, attacked, destroyed. Admiral Elias Ward stood at the center of the room, his broad frame rigid, his weathered face expressionless. But his eyes burned with a fury that could set stars ablaze. No one dared speak. Then he turned. His voice was not loud, yet it cut through the room like a blade. Mobilize the fleet. A murmur spread through the command center. Officers snapped to attention, their training kicking in. Orders were sent, alarms rang across military outposts, and deep in the heart of Earth's space docks, humanity's war machines awakened. Ward's hands clenched into fists. The Draknar thought they had silenced the Solace. They were dead wrong. The gathering storm. Across the Sol system, battle stations lit up. Thousands of warships powered online, their reactors humming like sleeping giants stirring from slumber. The Terran First Fleet, the strongest armada in human history, prepared for war. Earth did not send warnings. Earth did not negotiate. Earth answered blood with fire. On Mars, the 23rd Orbital Assault Fleet launched from their dry docks. The fleet was composed of heavy dreadnoughts, supercarriers, and swift destroyers, all painted black with the insignia of Terra's vengeance. The mobile fortress Titan, a behemoth nearly the size of a moon, activated its engines. Entire cities were built inside it, along with planet-killer railguns capable of punching through continents. The stealth fleet Phantom Reapers, ships that could phase out of existence, slipped into dark space, preparing to strike where the Draknar least expected. Aboard the flagship Indomitable, Admiral Ward stepped onto the bridge, his gaze fixed on the holographic star map displaying the Draknar dominion. He pointed to their homeworld. We're not just retaliating. His voice was iron. We're making sure they never dare touch a human again. The officers nodded grimly. They knew what this meant. This wasn't just a battle. This was extermination. The Draknar's arrogance. Meanwhile, deep in the Draknar dominion, Supreme Overlord Vraxis stood in his grand war chamber, surrounded by his generals. The news of the Solace's destruction had already spread across the Empire, and they were celebrating. Vraxis leaned back in his throne, his fanged mouth stretching into a cruel grin. The humans won't retaliate, one of his advisors scoffed. They know their place. Another general growled. Even if they do, Our fleets outnumber them 3-1. Let them come. We will crush them like insects." Laughter filled the chamber. The Draknar had spent centuries conquering weaker species. Humanity, in their eyes, was just another race to dominate. They had no idea what was coming for them. A junior officer hurried into the room, his scales pale with fear. He bowed, voice trembling. "Overlord, we have detected massive movements in human space. They are assembling their entire fleet." Vraxis snarled. "How many ships?" The officer hesitated. "Hundreds of thousands, my lord." Silence. For the first time, doubt flickered in the Overlord's mind. But he crushed it. "Good," he said, his voice firm. "Let them come. We will bathe in their blood." They still believed they had the upper hand. They still believed humans would fight like the other weak races. They were about to learn the truth. The final message to the galaxy. Before the Terran Armada launched, one final message was sent across the galaxy. A transmission from Earth itself, displayed in every language on every world. A human officer stood on screen, her expression void of emotion. Her words were simple. "To the Draknar Dominion, you have spilled innocent blood. You have broken the laws of war. You have made your choice. Now, we will make ours." The screen went black. And then the warships of Earth surged forward, leaving nothing but fire in their wake. Humanity's fury had awakened, and the galaxy would never forget it. The invasion begins. The stars trembled as humanity's war fleet surged across the void, their engines roaring like an unstoppable storm. For decades, humans had been seen as mere newcomers in the grand galactic stage. The other empires mocked their small numbers and youth as a species. Now those same empires watched in absolute silence as the largest armada in recorded history moved like a tide of death toward the Draknar Dominion. This was not a battle. This was judgment. The first strike, silent and deadly. The Draknar believed the war would begin with a grand battle. They expected blazing cannons, fleets clashing in glorious combat. Instead, the first attack came in darkness. The Phantom Reapers, humanity's stealth fleet, slipped undetected past enemy border defenses. Their mission was not to fight, but to cripple the Empire before the first shot was fired. On Draknar outposts, nothing seemed wrong. Officers patrolled, supply shipments arrived, fleets rested in their docks. Then, everything changed in an instant. Massive blackouts shut down planetary defense grids. Hyperlane beacons exploded, isolating systems from each other. The Draknar home fleet, millions of ships docked across different worlds, suddenly found their fuel stations destroyed in simultaneous attacks. When the alarms finally rang, it was already too late. Entire squadrons of Draknar warships tried to launch, but found themselves stranded in dry dock, their engines failing. Factories meant to build new warships were reduced to rubble before they could produce a single craft. Within 4 hours, the Draknar war machine had been crippled, and they hadn't even seen a single human ship. Panic spread like wildfire. The Overlord's War Council gathered in chaos, screaming at one another. How did they do this? We don't know. They came from nowhere. We must retaliate. But there was no retaliation. Because now, the real attack began. The Earth fleet arrives. The first wave of humanity's assault force arrived in Draknar-controlled space, moving with precision. At the head of the fleet, Admiral Ward stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, his expression unreadable as he watched dozens of star systems burn on his display. His officers waited for his orders. He only said 2 words: "No survivors." And with that, hell was unleashed. The first human dreadnoughts entered orbit over Draknar-controlled worlds and began surgical planetary strikes. Super-heavy kinetic bombardments, giant rods of pure tungsten, were fired at military bases, each one hitting with the force of a nuclear bomb, but leaving no radiation. Carrier ships deployed thousands of fighter squadrons, tearing through enemy strongholds. The Draknar, caught off guard, scrambled to respond. Their fleets rushed to intercept. They thought they still had a chance to fight back. Then they saw it. The Titan had arrived. The Titan awakens. It was unlike anything the Draknar had ever seen. A mobile fortress, a weaponized moon, crawling through space like a god of war. The Titan's shadow alone covered entire battlefields, its cannons each the size of a city. Draknar admirals screamed for all forces to focus fire on it. They fired. Thousands of plasma lances, massive railguns, hundreds of nuclear warheads. The Titan did not move. The weapons struck its surface and did nothing. Then the Titan returned fire. One shot from its main railgun, and an entire Draknar battle station vanished. Not destroyed, vaporized. A single moment of silence fell over the battlefield. The Draknar realized the truth. They had never fought a war against humanity before. They had fought against Earth's diplomats, its explorers, its merchants. But this was what happened when humans stopped talking. The true power of Earth's war machine had been hidden until now. And the Draknar had made the mistake of waking it up. The Draknar's last stand. Overlord Vraxis stood at the heart of his capital, watching as his empire crumbled in real time. His warriors, so feared across the stars, were being slaughtered without mercy. His fleets, once unmatched, were now broken and scattered. He refused to believe it. With rage burning in his chest, he gave his final order. All remaining forces, retributed to the homeworld. This war is not over. A desperate plan. A last stand. They would make their final defense on Draknar Prime, their fortress world. If they were to die, they would die fighting. But in his heart, Vraxis knew the truth. The war was over. The only thing left was for humanity to finish it. And they would, with fire, with steel, with vengeance. The siege of Draknar Prime. The once proud empire of the Draknar lay in ruins. Where once their war fleets had dominated the stars, now only wreckage floated in silent, burning graveyards. Their supply lines were severed, their outposts obliterated, and their colonies abandoned to panic and starvation. Now, only one world remained, the heart of their empire. Draknar Prime. The final battlefield. The place where humanity would end this war. The last defenders of the Draknar. Draknar Prime was a fortress world, wrapped in layer upon layer of planetary shields, armed with millions of orbital cannons, and protected by the last remnants of the Draknar fleet. Overlord Vraxis stood in his war chamber, staring at the holographic display. Humanity's fleet had arrived. It was impossible. There were so many ships that they blocked out the stars. Titan-class warships, Earth's moving fortresses, held position at the edges of the system, their weapons already charging. Dreadnoughts and cruisers spread in a perfect calculated formation, ensuring not a single escape route remained open. Humanity had come for one reason: to end them. Yet Vraxis refused to kneel. His warriors, the last and most fanatical of the Draknar, stood ready in the command chamber. They were the strongest, the fiercest, veterans of 100 battles. His fleet, though battered, still held thousands of warships. He turned to his generals. "This is our final stand. We will make them bleed for every step they take." But deep inside, for the first time in his life, Vraxis felt fear. The assault begins. The first strike came without warning. Humanity did not waste time with speeches. They did not send ultimatums. They did not negotiate. A single word flashed through Earth's war networks: fire. The Titan's primary railgun fired first, and the ground beneath Draknar Prime shook as if the gods themselves had struck. A continent-sized weapons facility vanished, reduced to molten slag. Thousands of human bombers swarmed from supercarriers, launching plasma payloads and kinetic warheads with pinpoint precision. Orbital defense cannons returned fire, lighting the sky with blazing plasma beams. But Earth's fleet was already moving, calculating trajectories, dodging the barrages with inhuman precision. Then, the ground invasion began. From the underbellies of warships miles long, drop pods and assault carriers rained down, entering the planet's atmosphere like falling meteors. The first wave of Earth's elite soldiers hit the surface like a hammer of vengeance. And Draknar Prime burned. The fall of the Overlord. The capital city, HFY, became a battlefield of fire and ruin. Draknar warriors fought like cornered beasts, their monstrous forms towering over human infantry. Yet they were not fast enough. Human soldiers moved with ruthless efficiency, their exosuits enhancing speed and strength, their weapons burning through armor like paper. For every human lost, 100 Draknar fell. Admiral Elias Ward personally led the assault on the Overlord's fortress, a towering citadel built into the mountains of HFY. The last of the Draknar elite warriors stood in the entrance, their weapons drawn, their eyes filled with hatred. "You will not pass." Ward drew his blade, a human-crafted vibro sword, forged in the fires of Earth's oldest traditions. "Then die here." The battle was over in minutes. The Draknar warriors were strong, but humans were faster, deadlier, and relentless. Ward cut through them, his blade flashing like lightning. His forces stormed the throne room, and there, standing alone, was Overlord Vraxis, the execution of an empire. The once mighty warlord, who had laughed when the Solace was destroyed, now stood in the ruins of his empire. Blood dripped from his mouth, his armor shattered, his claws shaking. Ward stepped forward, his pistol aimed directly at the Overlord's head. Vraxis sneered, "Kill me, human. But we are warriors. We do not beg." Ward's finger hovered over the trigger. "You were never warriors," he said, his voice cold as the void. "Warriors fight soldiers. You murdered the wounded. You bombed a hospital ship. You are not warriors. You are cowards." For the first time, Vraxis looked away. Ward's eyes narrowed. And then, a single shot. The Overlord of the Draknar Dominion fell, his body hitting the floor with a dull thud. The war was over. But humanity was not done. A final message to the galaxy. The moment Vraxis fell, every remaining Draknar fleet surrendered. Their homeworld was occupied. Their empire was gone. Earth's forces stood victorious, and the galaxy watched in stunned silence. Then, Earth broadcasted a message, not just to the Draknar, but to every empire, every species, every leader who had watched from the sidelines. Admiral Ward stood before the camera, his uniform stained with battle, his expression unshaken. "Let this be a warning." He stepped aside, revealing the burning remains of Draknar Prime, its once great cities reduced to nothing. Humanity does not seek war. He looked directly into the camera. "But if you ever attack us again, we will do worse than destroy you. We will erase you." The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, empires trembled. Because they all knew one thing now. Earth was no longer a young race. Humanity was no longer to be underestimated. They had warned the galaxy once. Now, no one would dare test them again. The final battle. The galaxy had never witnessed a war like this. There had been conquests before. Empires had fallen, species had been wiped out, and civilizations had collapsed under the weight of history. But never before had an empire been erased with such precision, such fury, such cold, calculated vengeance. The Draknar Dominion, once feared, once unstoppable, had been shattered in days. Yet, the battle was not over. The last remnants of the Draknar fleet, their most loyal commanders, their most devoted warriors, had refused to surrender. Instead of kneeling, they had gathered every remaining warship, every last soldier, every piece of firepower they had left. And they were heading straight for Earth. One final, desperate attack. If they could not win, they would burn with their enemy. The Draknar's last gamble. Aboard the warship Dreadfang, The new supreme commander of the Draconar, General Xerac, gritted his fangs as he stared at the holographic display. The remnants of their once mighty empire, now a single battle group. Out of the millions of ships the Dominion once commanded, only 15,000 remained. It was suicide. But he did not care. "Prepare the fleet," Xerac growled, his voice raw with fury. "We will strike Earth itself." His officers hesitated. One of them, Captain Orivac, stepped forward cautiously. "My lord, even if we reach their system, their defenses," Xerac snarled, slamming his fist against the console. "I will not die as a coward. I will not wait to be hunted down like an animal. If this is the end, then we end it on our terms." He turned to his fleet. "We fly to Earth. We make them suffer. We make them remember us." The Draconar roared in agreement. The engines of their remaining fleet flared to life. They jumped into hyperspace, straight to humanity's homeworld. Straight into the fire. The defense of Earth begins. The moment the Draconar fleet entered the Sol system, alarms rang across every human colony, every outpost, every military command center. But Earth was ready. Because humanity did not wait for wars to end. They ended them. The Solar Defense Fleet had been assembled before the Draconar even made their move. It was the largest planetary defense force ever constructed. A fleet built not to conquer, but to protect the beating heart of humanity. And now it stood waiting. In the vastness of space, over 100,000 human warships held position around Earth. The orbital defense grid, a web of automated battle stations, shield generators, and railgun satellites, stood charged and ready. The Titan, Earth's largest mobile fortress, hovered near the moon, its weapons already locked onto the incoming enemy. And at the head of the fleet, aboard the Indomitable, Admiral Elias Ward watched the Draconar ships emerge from hyperspace. He exhaled slowly. Fools. The Draconar thought they had found vengeance. Instead, they had flown straight into hell. The battle over Earth. The moment the Draconar fleet appeared, human warships opened fire. It was not a battle. It was annihilation. Massive railguns launched projectiles at near-light speeds, shattering Draconar warships on impact. Plasma lances carved through entire squadrons, melting metal and bone alike. The first wave of Draconar ships, nearly 5,000 strong, were wiped out in under 10 minutes. Still, the Draconar pushed forward. Their warships charged blindly, returning fire, desperate to reach Earth's surface. Admiral Ward watched their strategy unfold on his display. "They want to breach our defenses, make a landing." He turned to his officers. "Do not let a single ship pass." And with that, humanity's full force was unleashed. The Titan's main cannons fired again, obliterating an entire section of the enemy fleet in one shot. Supercarriers deployed waves of fighter squadrons, overwhelming enemy ships with sheer numbers. Draconar ships exploded in rapid succession, their formations breaking apart. Still, Xerac refused to retreat. "Push forward. Ram them, if you must." He had one goal, to get at least one ship through, to land on Earth, to cause even the slightest damage before they were wiped out. Then, suddenly, an alert flashed across human battle networks. One ship had broken through. The final ship, a single Draconar warship, the Dreadfang, had sacrificed its escorts to punch through the human blockade. It roared toward Earth, engines burning at maximum speed, shields failing, hull breaking apart under concentrated fire. But it would not stop. If it could just reach the atmosphere, if it could just detonate above a human city, it could still hurt them. One last act of revenge. But before it could enter Earth's orbit, a single human warship broke formation, chasing it down at full speed. The Indomitable. Admiral Ward himself was coming. The final kill. Inside the Dreadfang, Xerac stood at the bridge, grinning madly. "Almost there," he growled, eyes locked on the glowing blue planet ahead. "Almost." Then his ship shuddered violently. The Indomitable had caught up. The human dreadnought fired its engines at full thrust, matching speed with the Draknar vessel. Ward's voice came through the comms, calm and cold. "Your war ends here." Then the Indomitable fired its main railgun. The shot pierced straight through the Dreadfang's core, shattering its reactors. For a split second, Serac saw the Earth, so close, just beyond his reach. Then, his ship exploded into dust. The war is over. The last Draknar ship was gone. Their empire wiped from existence. Humanity had won. As the wreckage of the Dreadfang drifted into nothingness, Admiral Ward stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, staring at the blue planet below. Earth was safe. The war had ended, and the galaxy would never forget what happened here. Humanity had given one warning. They had promised vengeance. Now, the stars would remember their wrath forever. Justice delivered. The war was over. The Draknar dominion no longer existed. Once, they had ruled over thousands of worlds, their fleets stretching across the stars. They had waged wars of conquest, enslaved weaker species, and mocked humanity as an insignificant young race. Now, their entire civilization was ash and wreckage, floating in the void, a silent reminder of what happens when Earth is provoked. But even with victory, there was still unfinished business. The Galactic Council's silence. The war crimes of the Draknar were not a secret. The destruction of the Solace, the ruthless slaughter of the wounded, the deliberate attack on a neutral hospital ship, it had been broadcast across the entire galaxy. And yet, the Galactic Council had done nothing. They had not intervened. They had not condemned the attack. They had not even acknowledged it. Even now, with the Draknar dominion reduced to dust, the Council remained silent. But Earth was not silent. A transmission was sent from Luna Base, addressed to every major empire, every planetary government, every species that had watched this war unfold. The face of Admiral Elias Ward appeared on screens across the galaxy. His eyes were cold. His voice was absolute. Earth's final statement. To the Galactic Council. Humanity once believed in your laws, your treaties, your rules of war. We followed them. We obeyed them. And when the Draknar slaughtered a hospital full of wounded civilians, you did nothing. You stood aside and watched as they murdered doctors, children, and the defenseless. You remained silent as they tried to erase our people. So we erased them instead. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle. Then he continued, his tone even colder. Do not mistake our patience for weakness. Do not mistake our mercy for submission. The Draknar have paid the price for their crimes, and should another empire ever follow in their footsteps, let this be your warning. We will not wait for your permission to defend our own. The screen flickered black, and the galaxy shuddered. The aftermath of war. The Galactic Council was shaken. Never before had an empire acted so decisively, so ruthlessly, so effectively. Empires twice as old as humanity had taken centuries to rise and fall. Yet Earth had wiped out the Draknar in a matter of weeks. The message was clear. Do not cross the Terran Federation. But the fallout of the war went beyond simple fear. With the Draknar gone, a massive power vacuum formed. The rise of humanity's allies. Before the war, many smaller species had been too afraid to defy the Draknar. Now, with their oppressors gone, these civilizations turned to Earth for leadership. The Arthani Republic, a species that had spent decades under Draknar rule, sent a delegation to Earth. Their leader, Chancellor Velis, stood before the Terran High Command. His voice shook with gratitude. For years, we suffered under the boot of the Draknar. The Council ignored us. The great empires turned their backs. But you did not. You are not just warriors. You are justice itself. We will stand with you, now and forever. Similar messages came from dozens of other species. Races that had once viewed humans as insignificant upstarts now saw them as protectors, avengers, and the only true enforcers of justice. For the first time in galactic history, Earth was not just respected. It was feared, and it was followed, rebuilding from the ashes. Despite the war's brutality, Earth did not leave the galaxy in ruins. Instead of ruling with an iron fist, they rebuilt. Where the Draconar had enslaved, humanity freed. Where the Draconar had destroyed, humanity restored. On the ruins of Draconar Prime, human engineers constructed a monument, not to victory, but to remembrance. A memorial to the lost, engraved with the names of every soul who had died aboard the Solace. A single message was carved into the stone, written in every language known to the stars. We do not seek war, but we will end it. A new era begins. The war had changed everything. The Terran Federation was no longer a minor power, it was a superpower. A force that no empire dared challenge. A force that others now looked to for leadership. And as Admiral Ward stood aboard the Indomitable, staring out into the endless void, he knew one thing for certain. This war had been the first, but it would not be the last. There would always be tyrants. There would always be those who sought to oppress the weak. And when they did, humanity would be waiting, ready to deliver justice, ready to defend those who could not defend themselves. And if the galaxy did not yet understand, they would soon. A warning to the galaxy. The war was over. The Draconar Dominion was nothing more than ash and scattered debris floating in the void, their fleets obliterated, their leaders executed, their world left to burn. But the echoes of war did not die with them. Across the stars, from the wealthy core worlds of the Galactic Council to the distant fringes where law was nothing more than a suggestion, the name Earth now carried a weight it had never held before. Humanity had not simply won a war. They had rewritten the rules of the galaxy. And the galaxy was afraid. The Council's unraveling. Before the war, the Galactic Council had been the supreme authority of the known universe. They passed laws, brokered treaties, and enforced their will upon weaker civilizations with a quiet arrogance, as if their rule would last forever. Now, they sat in their grand chambers on Cathar Prime, gathered in a hastily arranged emergency session, their voices trembling, their advisors whispering in frantic huddles. Fear. Not a single race in the council chambers had lifted a hand to stop the Draconar from butchering a hospital ship. Not a single one had moved to condemn them. And now, Earth had torn an empire apart and made it look effortless. A hologram flickered to life in the center of the chamber, the final transmission from Earth's Admiral Ward. Do not mistake our patience for weakness. Do not mistake our mercy for submission. We will not wait for your permission to defend our own. The council chambers were silent as the message ended. Then the arguments began. We must punish them for this. If we allow Earth to act outside of council authority, punish them. You saw what they did to the Draconar. If we move against them, we'll be next. This sets a dangerous precedent. A species cannot just decide to enforce their own justice. Then where were we when the Solace was destroyed? Where was the Council's justice? No one had an answer. Some demanded sanctions against Earth. Others warned against provoking them further. For the first time in history, the once powerful Council was paralyzed by fear. And outside their chambers, the galaxy was shifting. The rise of a new power. As the Council argued, Earth expanded. No longer just a single system power, humanity was now the center of a new political force, one that did not answer to the Council's authority. They called it the Terran Pact. Dozens of species, races who had once lived in fear of the Draconar, ignored by the Council, now turned to Earth for protection. The Arthani, the Velkari, the Tarsan Union, species that had once been isolated, weak, forgotten, now stood under the banner of the Terran Pact, not as subjects, but as allies. Earth had not conquered them. Earth had freed them. And that was what made them more dangerous than any empire before. Because Earth did not rule through fear. They ruled through loyalty, through respect, through unshakable resolve. And that terrified the Council more than any fleet ever could. The shadows stir. But as humanity's power grew, so too did the whispers of new threats lurking in the dark corners of the galaxy. The destruction of the Drachnar had not gone unnoticed. There were others watching. Others who did not fear the Council. Others who saw a new challenger rising and began to make plans. Deep within the Black Zone, an area of space long considered lawless and uncharted, something ancient awakened. A signal, faint, inhuman, older than any known civilization. It pulsed, echoing across the void, received only by those who knew how to listen. And in the darkness of space, on a world forgotten by time, an intelligence that had slept for eons opened its eyes. It had seen what humanity had done. It had watched as they defied the balance of power. And it had waited long enough. The first true test of Earth's new empire was coming. Something far more dangerous than the Drachnar. Something that had been waiting for war. And it would soon decide. Was humanity truly as strong as they believed? Or had they only just begun to understand the true depths of the abyss? A final message from Earth. Before humanity's fleets returned home, before the last soldiers stepped off the battlefield, Earth sent one final transmission to the galaxy. Not a threat, not a demand, just a simple warning. There will always be those who believe they can rule through fear. There will always be those who think war is the only answer. We are not conquerors. We do not seek war. But if you bring war to us, we will finish it. The message ended, and the stars held their breath. Because now, the entire galaxy knew one undeniable truth. The era of the old powers had ended. The era of humanity had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again.